So I'd like people to be able to quickly make an organic looking 3D printed enclosure for an Arduino. And towards that goal, I've created a template Arduino, which I call Blocky Arduino with Sketches. And I made this because the 3D STL, which I downloaded from Thingiverse, was too complicated with the solder joint geometries, and it slowed my computer down. So this is about the same size, a little bit bigger. It has pegs for the mounting holes. It's got uh, a block for the USB input and a block for the round power cable. And the actual Arduino only comes up about maybe 2/3 this height. I left a little extra on there for wires to be inserted in. So here I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to hit create. I'm going to choose box. I'm going to choose the top plane here. I'm going to start about in the middle. Oh, there we go. Let's make it a little bit big. And shift and then depressing the scroll wheel on my mouse allows me to orbit. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to choose, I'm going to expand the bodies dialog. I'm going to click on here. I'm going to call this enclosure. I'm going to right click and I'm going to move it down. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to right click on enclosure and go to opacity control, change it to 50% so I can see that Arduino in there. I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to right click, edit form, and let's see, scale. There we go. And now notice that I want a flat mounting surface to put the Arduino on, and this is curved. So I'm going to subdivide these portions. So we can go to utilities, nope, modify, and subdivide. And it added a few extra faces in there. So this means that's going to be a little bit flatter. These four right here. And if I wanted, I could also grab the edges of this guy. Let's do that. I'm going to choose that. Click this edge, shift left click, shift left click, shift left click. Oops, I grabbed the vertex, not the edge. And then right click, edit form, go back to transform mode, push down, shift, and then depress the scroll wheel on the mouse. So I can see that that will actually push that down, up and down if I really wanted to flatten some of that out. But actually, I like the roundedness on the bottom. I'm going to Control Z. I'm going to play a bit with the top here, so I'm going to pick those guys, those vertices, say edit form, rotate a bit around, I'm going to pull those back, say OK. Just depressing the scroll wheel on the mouse pans, doesn't just orbit. And I'm going to click this one and then shift left click this one, right click edit form, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go up. Okay, so I have a little interesting feature. And let's move this guy for giggles. We'll pull that back. No, just down. Okay. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to make this whole 3D enclosure a shell. And in order to do that, I need to go to Model. And I also need to change this from T-splines to a B-rep. T-splines are these curved lines here, and B-rep is a boundary representation. So I say convert, say T-splines to B-rep. You can see there are some other menu options here, but that's what I'm choosing. Say OK. And now you'll notice it made a new body. It automatically turned the light bulb off. It hid the previous enclosure. I'm going to call this one enclosure also. Oops. Enclosure brep or body. And now I'm going to go to modify and say shell. And I'm going to choose the outside thickness. I'm going to make it 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And I could have it go on the inside too, but I'm going to keep it on the outside. So we're going to see it get a little bit bigger. Oh, barely. I'm going to right click on opacity, make it 50%. And now, sure enough, we can see that there's some wall thickness. You can see that right there. Now I'd like to move the enclosure, so that the bottom of the enclosure is just underneath the Arduino here. I could move the Arduino. If I moved that, I should be sure to highlight the 2 sketches that are associated with it also, so they all move together. I made a couple of sketches for the mounting holes and for the USB and for the power. But the other way to do that is just to move the enclosure. So right click and move. I'm going to move that up, and I'm going to go right to the edge here. I'm going to zoom in with the scroll wheel. I want to make sure this is it's really on the inner surface. When I figure this out better, I'll do an interference fit, but I don't know how to do that yet. So I'm cheating a little bit. I'm going to move the enclosure again. Move it down a smidge, zoom in. That looks pretty good. That looks good to me. Okay, now I do want it a little bit closer to the rear. I'm going to call this the front, this the back. So let's move the enclosure again. Oops, I highlighted just one side, not the whole thing. I'm going to hit cancel. There we go. And now move. And that's close enough for me. Now I would like to have through holes for the USB and for the power. So there's a funny way this works. When you want to select a face or vertex or a line that is hidden behind another object, you hold the left mouse button down for a while until this option comes up. I'm letting go of the left mouse button, and I'm moving down until I find the feature I want. I'm going to choose this face, and because I want to add this other one, I'm going to hold Shift and left click and hold left click again until this menu comes up, letting left click up until I find the other face there. Now I let go of Shift and the left click. Now I'm right clicking on this, and I'm going to say extrude, and I'm going to pull this all the way out here, and I'm going to make sure that this says cut, and there we go. Now I'm going to do the same for this face. I'm going to hold left until this menu comes up. I'm letting up the left button. I'm moving down until I find the face I want, and then holding Shift. I'm holding Shift down, and I hold left click down again until this comes up, and I can do that. I'm actually going to see if I can grab the profile that I made. That's why I did it, so maybe that's a little faster. I'm going to hold Shift. Nope, I'm not holding Shift. I'm holding the left mouse button down. I'm going to grab that profile, and I'm going to see if I can extrude. Oops. Shift, scroll wheel, depress to orbit, holding left button down, choosing the profile, right click, extrude, grab that arrow, come out here, we're in cut, and sure enough we can. So I'm glad that those profiles will work. So I didn't have to grab these spaces here, I could just grab that profile. Now I'm going to do something similar with the mount holes. Now let's see, can I... This is a little harder for me. Let's try that profile. And let's say extrude. And yeah, no, I can do the same. There we go. I'm curious if I can do this with all these. Nope, having a little trouble grabbing that. And maybe... Ah. Okay. Another way to do this, and I'll do it like so, is to just grab the mounting hole sketch and let me see if I can press pull. Not yet. I'm going to hide this enclosure. I'm going to highlight the mounting hole sketch. I'm actually going to hide the blocky Arduino as well. And I'm just going to click hit the light bulb on the mounting hole sketch, make sure that's highlighted. Highlight the area of each of these. It's a little bit funny sometimes. So highlighting the area, not the center and not the perimeter, holding shift, left click, shift, left click, shift, left click. Now I'm going to do a press pull. I'm going to pull down, and I'm making these new bodies. And you see it created these new bodies here. Now I'm throwing the enclosure back on, zooming out, and now I'm highlighting the enclosure, and I'm saying modify, combine, and I've selected the target body already, the enclosure. Now I'm going to choose the tools. I'm going to choose these guys. You don't even have to shift left click them, you just click them all, and it's already on cut. I'm going to say OK, and there we've got those holes. I'm going to hide the sketches. I'm going to throw the Arduino back in there. So that looks pretty good. Looks like I have holes to mount it through. I can see the power cord and the USB areas. Now what I'd like to do is cut this body in half. So I can 3D print two enclosures, and so I've highlighted the enclosure. I'm going to say modify. I'm going to say split body. First I need to make my sketch. I need to make the construction plane to cut this in half with. So I'm going to go to Sketch, Create Sketch. I'm going to do it on the top face here. I'm going to create a rectangle, 2-point rectangle. Funny little reorientation there and there. And then I'm going to click on that sketch, and I'm going to say, first I'm going to stop the sketch. I'm going to say offset plane. I'm going to move this up until it's about halfway through. And then I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to highlight the enclosure again. I'm going to say modify, split body. I'm going to choose the splitting tool, and I see our red circle that shows it's going to intersect. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to hide the sketches, hide the construction plane. And now I have two halves, and I can see it's split it into the top half and the bottom half. So I'm going to say top. Oops, that's bottom. And here I'm going to say top. And now for giggles, I can move it just to show that that's two different parts. And I can turn the opacity back to 100% for each of these. So now I've got those two halves. I can see the Arduino in there. I can see the ports. I can see my mounting holes. And now I can save each of these as STLs. Bottom, that's top again, top blocky Arduino. And we'll click on the bottom and right click, save as STL. And we'll say bottom enclosure.